Hello and welcome back to the channel for updates in the Vallow Daybell case. Although today we're going to be looking at Brandon Boudreau and Melanie Pawlowski's custody trial that began just this morning. So let's get into what happened today. It will be carried over till tomorrow, but we can catch up on today's events nonetheless. This morning's trial was supposed to be starting at 8:30. It took about 2.5 hours before it actually began, and we started off with a surprise from both sides. Brandon and Melanie had come to several agreements this morning before court even started, as a result of the report that was released last night by Dr. Carol Mellon. She is the clinical psychologist who was ordered to evaluate both parties and their fitness as parents. Her recommendations were taken very seriously by both sides, and they came to some agreements. First, they agreed to joint custody. Yeah, I was surprised by that. Melanie will have to undergo a period of reintroduction with the children for about a month, and then as of January 4th, 2021, she will have full co-parenting rights as far as legal making decisions and parenting time. It's going to be split 50-50 between both parents. That was very surprising. I did not expect to hear that, especially the first thing. Given all of the other filings in the court process, and you can go back through my videos, and I have most of them up in video format, all the documents are also loaded into our Discord server, Brandon seemed to be putting up one heck of a fight. And he didn't show any signs of backing down. So hearing right off the bat that they agreed to full joint custody and joint legal decision-making, I found a little shocking. So we had to deal with that this morning. There's a lot of arguments about money and stuff like that, and very quickly they took a break. And this break was about 2.5, almost 3 hours long, and when we came back, Brandon took the stand. Now, the only thing that they were arguing this afternoon was finances. Both sides were arguing that the other one should be responsible for attorney's fees and things like that. Brandon takes the stance first, and the lawyer starts questioning him about filing dates, financial statements, incomes, payments to Melanie, etc., etc. It was tedious and boring, but Brandon testified that Melanie left the kids, not that he kept them from her, but Melanie's attorney grills him about Melanie reaching out and asking for the kids. They argued about the context and content of text messages between Melanie and Brandon, wherein Melanie was asking for the kids back before the court agreed, but Brandon says she never asked for the kids back. But this part was a little frustrating. Honestly, I'm going to give you my honest opinion. You know that sometimes I say things that are against the grain around here. Brandon was really irritating when he was on the stand. They were talking about a text in which Melanie said, "I'm moving to Boise, but you can keep the kids with you, but then we can talk about maybe going back to mediation, or I can have them during school holidays, or let's talk about how you want to do this." Right? But Brandon was stuck on that first part of the text saying, "I'm moving to Boise, bye." As if she hadn't said anything else. And the lawyer's like, "But look, right here, Melanie's saying, hey, let's talk about when I can have them. Can I have them school holidays? Or do you want to go back to mediation? How do you want to do this?" And Brandon's like, "Nope, I disagree. She abandoned the kids." And the lawyer's like, "But it says right here that she wanted time with them." Nope, I disagree." I'm like, "Brandon, what are you doing?" So I found that a little frustrating. Scoresby was introducing text messages that seemed to show Brandon not adhering to the court agreement. And Brandon is just disagreeing with the context of these text messages. Scoresby, who is Melanie's attorney, then brings up the day that Melanie went to Brandon's parents' home to get the kids in mid-November of 2019. Brandon's parents did not let Melanie see the kids, and they called the police because she was trespassing. Scoresby arguing that this was in violation of the court order for shared parenting time. Now, this has been argued back and forth for a couple months now. Melanie says she had a court order for shared parenting time, and thus she had rightful access to the children. Brandon says no, she never did. She was making it up. And Melanie says, well, she got her court order and went back the next day to show them. And then she was arrested for trespassing on their property. But right here, the lawyer is showing, look, there was a court order. Melanie did have rights to the children at that time, and Brandon was actually keeping her from them. Now, morally, we may agree with Brandon at the time, but legally, that was an error. Okay, and that's what the lawyers are arguing. Brandon says that he disagrees that she was requesting time with the children, even though Scoresby is showing us texts where she actually asked for the children. So I was, really just kind of like, Brandon, what are you doing? That was a little irritating. Scoresby was talking about the many text messages that Melanie sent Brandon repeatedly asking for access to the children. Brandon refused her access and says that he didn't even receive those texts. So the argument goes forth between the lawyer and Brandon, where the lawyer says, but Melanie was asking for the children. And Brandon says, well, I disagree. He's like, well, look, there's a text message right here. And Brandon's like, well, I never saw it. Well, why didn't you see it? Well, because I blocked her. And the lawyer's like, okay, well, if you blocked her, that doesn't mean she didn't ask. She did ask, you just didn't see it because you had blocked her. Yeah, well, I disagree. Like, you disagree with what? What are you talking about? It was a really irritating part of the day, and it went on for about an hour. Brandon says that the detective told him not to accept messages from Melanie, and he sticks to his statement that Melanie was not requesting time with the children, which he says is valid because he didn't actually see the messages, regardless of the fact that she was pretty consistently asking for time with the children. Then Scoresby brings up the shooting attempt, and he said that the shooting attempt is still under investigation and there are no suspect at this time, right? But he kind of lets that drop right there, and we'll come back to that later. Scoresby then shows a Facebook post made by Melanie where she's asking for help to find her kids because she wants them with her. Brandon disagrees that that's what the post meant, and Scoresby keeps saying that Brandon kept the kids from Melanie before he had a court order giving him permission to keep them from her. Therefore, he should have to pay her attorney fees since she was forced into litigation to get her children back by his own behavior. Scoresby then reiterates that going through this trial was simply to revert back to the original court order and was a waste of time. Now, this is where I think he actually has a valid legal argument. Before all of this happened, right, there was a court order with a court, a decree that said that they had shared parenting time, 50-50, right? This was already said and done. But when Melanie took off, and Brandon filed this other thing, the emergency order and all that stuff, all that changed. But now where we're at right now today is that all we've done is gone back to the original agreement that they had before. A few little minor tweaks here and there. Melanie's lawyers are arguing that this whole thing was a giant waste of time. We went through all of these hearings and all of this stuff just to go back to where we started from. He may actually have an argument there, because it was a giant waste of time and a waste of the court's resources, so he's going to argue that that means that Brandon should pay for Melanie's legal fees. We'll see what happens with that tomorrow. And Brandon, in typical form for his time on the stand, says, yeah, he agreed to this early this morning, but he disagrees with Scoresby. He still maintains that Melanie abandoned her children in October. Now, this was argued to determine who's responsible for the legal fees. That's the whole point of this, okay? They're not trying to make any moral statements. Brandon has given up his argument that Melanie should not have the kids or be around them. Now they're just arguing over who is responsible for all this court mess, so who has to pay the legal fees. Right, so Brandon is digging in his heels saying that Melanie abandoned her kids, period. Now, on one hand, part of me says, well, yeah, she did. She up and left her kids. That's abandonment. But technically or legally, the fact that she was still trying to reach out and still wanted time with them and willing to go back to mediation and all this stuff, maybe she didn't. Maybe she did. This is going to be a tricky point for the court to rule on, because on one hand, yeah, she up and left her kids behind, moved to another state, said goodbye, didn't even tell Brandon exactly where she was. So, to me, that's kind of abandonment, but now she's saying, I still wanted to have visitation, but he wouldn't let me. So, both sides kind of have a point here. The court is going to have to think that one through pretty carefully. Now, Dr. Carol Mellon, who did the psychological evaluation of the parents, says in her report that Melanie did not abandon the children. I need to get my hands on that report because I really want to read the whole thing now. There were texts from Melanie that said, I made a decision to move to Boise. We can work out a new agreement about the kids. You can keep them there, but I can have them for the holidays. Please let me know what you want to do, so on and so forth. And by Dr. Mellon's assessment, that was Melanie trying to maintain connections with her children and visitation and parenting time, so on and so forth. So she did not just up and abandon her children with no intention of ever talking to them again. Scoresby, however, says that's clearly not abandonment. She was moving and wanted to work out a new custody agreement. People move. It happens. But Brandon says, nope, that's her abandoning her children. Period. She ran, she fled, she abandoned them. Dr. Mellon does not agree with Brandon's perspective on that. Now, Melanie's lease agreement in Rexburg that she signed in November lists all 4 children as occupants. And Scoresby argues that her listing the children as occupants shows that she intended to have the children there, at least for visitations. You wouldn't do that if you were abandoning your children. And Melanie's texts also show that she intended to have visitation with the children, not that she was abandoning them. She may have moved, but she still wanted to be their parent. So they spent a good portion of the day arguing this back and forth with no clear resolution on which legal side is going to win that argument. Maybe we'll hear more about that tomorrow. Then they dive back into the finances. There was an agreement in place to split education and common costs. 80% Brandon, 20% Melanie. Other costs paid the same way, such as preschool fees, education needs, extracurricular activities, etc. And they argued about who actually paid it, who owed it, Brandon, I guess, paid it from a joint account, but that was his money anyway. But Melanie wanted him to pay her the 80%. I don't know. It was tedious, mind-numbing financial arguing back and forth. Both of them fully sure that their position was correct and arguing that, well, because so-and-so did this, then they have to pay me. And the other person said, well, I paid all this, so they have to pay me. Blah, blah, blah. And it was irritating. I tell you what, I was irritated. So Scoresby says that Brandon is contending that Melanie was involved in the shooting attempt without any evidence. Oh, okay, now we're going to get into something interesting. Brandon says he disagrees. So, okay, you disagree that there's no evidence. So the lawyer says, well, what evidence do you have? Scoresby says there's been zero evidence provided to this court that Melanie is in any way tied to the shooting. Brandon disagrees again and again, but at the same time, he offers no citation of any evidence whatsoever. So that didn't go well for his side of the argument. Regardless of what you and I may think about the shooting attempt, there is no evidence to tie Melanie to that crime, and Brandon is asserting that she was the one behind it without any evidence. That's not okay. All right, and I think Melanie's lawyer was very good at making that point clear. So I may not agree with it personally, but legally, there's no evidence. If there's no evidence, there's no evidence. So they need to get on that investigation. Then Brandon's attorney starts asking some questions. He revisits the text when Melanie said she was moving and that Brandon could keep the children with him. Brandon proceeded with legal protections to give him all the rights to the children as a result of that action by Melanie. So Brandon says there was no agreement with Melanie for distance parenting, etc. She did not file anything with the court until January 2nd, 2020 to try to get access to the children. So she sends him a text in mid-October, says, I'm leaving for Boise, and she does nothing until January of 2020 to try to legally get access to the children. Brandon said he had been in contact with law enforcement during that time because of the attempt on his life, and he filed a petition for the emergency motion in Arizona in October 2019 that Melanie did not attend or even attempt to attend that hearing or file any response. Brandon said that this morning he agreed to the shared parenting time only because there would be court-appointed therapeutic intervention to oversee the differences between them. Interesting, because like I said before, Brandon fought so hard against her even having visitation that all of a sudden this great big agreement that gives her 50-50, it's like, what happened overnight, Brandon? If you look at the images on your screen, what you're seeing are the pretrial statements from Melanie and from Brandon. And if you read Brandon's, you can pause the video to read them, or you can check them out in Discord or on Justin Lum's Facebook and Twitter. Links are all in the description. But when you read them, you see how contentious they are. It certainly does not sound, from reading those, like Brandon is going to give up the fight, but I guess he did. So why? Maybe we'll never find out. Anyway, moving on in the hearing, Brandon again says that he didn't keep Melanie from the kids because he never received her request to see them. Okay, technically that could be true, but his position looked really weak today. Brandon states that Melanie knew all about the proceedings in Arizona and chose not to appear. Melanie will address that later on. Dr. Mellon's report states that the legal status of the mother and her being charged for any crimes could change. So this agreement is based on the current situation that there are no charges against Melanie. But her recommendations are subject to change if Melanie's legal status changes. Now, this is a point that Brendan is very clear about. He says, at this time, there are no charges, but I expect that there will be, and at that point, I disagree with these recommendations. Okay, I get that. Certainly if Melanie is charged somehow with conspiracy to commit murder or whatever on the attempt of Brandon's life, then yeah, we should revisit this custody agreement. So that's pretty much what Brandon is saying. Brandon and his lawyer go back and forth over the financial details of Brendan's income, cost of health insurance, on and on, the sale of some properties, him buying out her interest in a business that they had, all of that kind of stuff. Very dry, very financial, very boring stuff. Just trying to argue who should be responsible for all the legal fees and who paid what at what time and who owes who how much money. They keep circling back to a lot of the same topics over and over. Melanie said she was moving to Boise, not Rexburg. Why did she lie about that? She's being untruthful. Brandon was worried maybe she was trying to hide the children from him. Brandon and Melanie are both arguing that the other should be responsible for the fees and the costs because both of them misled the court. They're both saying the same thing. Melanie's saying Brandon should pay all the attorney's fees because it's his fault we're in court and he misled the court. And Brandon is saying Melanie should be responsible for all the attorney's fees because it's her fault we're here and she misled the court. So the judge is going to be the one to have to sort through that and decide who he thinks the facts rest with and make his determination. We take another little break and then Melanie Pulowski herself is on the stand. Now, they begin with talking about the statements made by Detective Pillar. Right, there are 2 statements offered to the court by Detective Pillar. One in June and one from more recently. In the statement in June, Detective Pillar says that Melanie is a person of interest in the shooting of Brandon. Okay. Now, a person of interest is a legal designation in the investigation of a case. That's a very important distinction. But in the other statement, he changes and he says that she is an investigative lead. All right, now that's very different than a person of interest. And the investigative lead is his newer position. So that doesn't look so good for Brandon either, because it looks like she's downgraded from a person of interest to an investigative lead. But neither of these statements state that Melanie is actually a suspect. All right, Melanie says that she has nothing to do with the shooting. But Brandon still alleges very firmly that Melanie was involved in the shooting in some way. He does say in one statement later on, in a text or email message to her, that he doesn't think she did the shooting, but that she knows who did. Brandon alleges in a lot of his pretrial motions and documents and things that he believes Melanie was involved in the shooting. She was in a cult. She believed in zombies and dark spirits. She believed that sometimes someone has to die to remove the zombie curse thing. You know, all of the things that we've heard about. We read an Ian statement and all of this stuff. But Dr. Mellon made a finding that Melanie did not believe those things, and she does not, nor has she ever posed a threat to her children. Huh, interesting. So, as of this morning's agreement, Melanie is restored to joint custody of the children with a short reintroductory phase with them in December. Now we go back to arguing about money again. Melanie and Brandon agreed per a child support order in 2019 that Brandon's income was $15,000 per month. Really? Dang, that's a lot of money. And that Melanie's income was $0 because she was a stay-at-home mom. Melanie does say on the stand that she has given birth to another child who is now 2 months old, and Ian is the father. So there, finally, legal, verified confirmation that Melanie has another child. The lawyer states that Brandon has not offered any income verification forms for 2020, and Melanie's asking for $1,120 a month for child support. So, more financial stuff, back and forth, yada yada. Melanie says that she doesn't owe Brandon anything for child support since he refused to allow her contact with the children. Now we're arguing who gets to pay the fee for Dr. Mellon. The court ordered that Brandon and Melanie were to split the cost of Dr. Mellon's fees, but Melanie is saying that Brandon should pay for all of it since it was Brandon's fault, because he made the claim that she had mental illness, but Dr. Mellon's report indicated that Melanie had no mental illness at all. The report also states that Brandon showed psychological abnormalities. That's interesting. Didn't expect to see that one either. So the lawyer stating that the lawyer then goes on to talk about how Brandon and Melanie were supposed to split the proceeds from the sale of a home, but Brandon did not pay her half. He was also supposed to pay her a sum of $3,250 for her interest in a Keystone business, but he didn't pay her that. Melanie requests an order against him for these payments and for Brandon to be held in contempt of court and for her attorney's fees required to enforce those orders. The lawyer reiterates that no evidence has been presented to the court that Melanie was involved in the shooting or that Melanie had ever done anything to harm her children. You know, at this point, I'm thinking, this doesn't look so good for Brandon. It really doesn't. So the bottom line, Melanie says she's asking for child support, the payment for the Quinn home, the payment for Keystone, Dr. Mellon's fees to be covered, and her attorney's fees. So she's not asking for much, just probably a cool $200,000. My goodness. We take another little 5-minute recess, and then we are back on the record. Melanie is now being questioned by Brandon's lawyers, and she doesn't seem to like it. Right off the bat, she's refusing to give a yes or no answer because she wants to explain the situation more, not lock herself into a yes, but Kreider pushes it. The judge rules with him, and she has to answer yes when Kreider asks if Melanie sent Brandon a text indicating that she was moving to Boise and the kids could stay with him. Now, yes, she did do that, but the text is very different if you read the next couple sentences, so I can understand her hesitancy to say yes, but Kreider pushes it, and that gets entered into the record. Melanie said that she moved to Rexburg in the first week of November 2019, which we know. She moved into an apartment that she rented by herself, and no one was with her, but she did say that her uncle Alex visited, Ian visited, and her stepchildren visited. And I was like, wait, what? What stepchildren? And I'm like, oh yeah. Ian's kids back before they were actually her stepchildren. So she left on October 31st and moved in the first week of November. She drove for a couple of days, took her 2 or 3 days, she said, to get there. But January 2nd was the first time she ever got an attorney and filed anything in the case. Kreider states that she had 2 months without any legal action in the case. But she explains this when she's talking to her lawyer again by saying that she had called her mediator, right, because they were going through mediation for custody, and the mediator said, you know, we can't just hop back into mediation. There are legal things that have to go through, so we have to follow procedure, and you should probably get a lawyer. So that's why she didn't attend the hearings or do anything right away because of the advice she says she was given by her mediator. So that could be an issue. Brandon's attorney was very good at getting Melanie to agree to certain things that kind of chipped away at her lawyer's argument from before. She agreed that any parent should be concerned if the other parent moves out of state away from the children. She also agreed that Brandon brought forth legal action because he felt the children needed to be protected, and that she thinks any father doing that is reasonable. And that kind of chips away at her attorney's argument, because if they're pursuing him for all the legal costs, they kind of have to show that his legal action was unreasonable. But here she is on the stand arguing or agreeing with the attorney that, yeah, of course that was reasonable. All right, so her lawyer's probably smacking his head over that one. Kreider points out that Melanie maintained relationships with Lori and Alex while in Idaho, and Melanie has no conversations with Detective Pillar recently regarding any pending investigations. Kreider gets Melanie to agree that both her and Brandon wanted Dr. Mellon's assessment. That kind of legally covers the agreement that they should share the cost. They then bounce back to Lori and Alex, and Melanie says her last contact with them was in October of 2019. Melanie admits that she was arrested at Brandon's parents' home for trespassing, and Kreider argues that Melanie chose to leave Arizona and ignore the court orders, therefore Brandon bringing the legal action is her own fault. Melanie says that her association with Alex, Chad, and Lori was appropriate at the time because she wasn't aware of what they were doing. She didn't make a bad decision being with them because she didn't know they were doing anything wrong. Kreider asked Melanie, well, did you really think it would have been a good idea for Brandon to send the kids up there to Idaho to you when you were with Chad and Alex and Lori? And Melanie says that she wasn't asking for that. She was asking for them to go back into mediation to work out an agreement. Interesting. Kreider and Melanie continue talking about finances, attorney fees, their debts, incomes, on and on. More boring financial stuff. Nothing earth-shattering came of that conversation. But then they talk about how they got Dr. Mellon's report just last night at 11 p.m. and they had ironed out the agreement by this morning. That's pretty quick for a 130-something page report. I wonder if any of them actually read all the way through it. Kreider reiterates that if Melanie's legal status should change as a result of the potential charges regarding the shooting, then Dr. Mellon's recommendations change, and Melanie says she understands. Kreider points out that Melanie chose to leave the state, abandon her children by not being an emotional support for them very shortly after an attempt was made on their father's life, and that seems like emotional abandonment. Kreider rests, and then Melanie's attorney comes back for another go. Melanie says that the full text message says that she was moving to Boise, but she offered various solutions to co-parenting and mediation, and she states that Brandon truncated that text message to make it look worse than it actually was. Which, honestly, we may not like it, but let's admit it's true. Melanie's mediator told her that they couldn't go back right to mediation because there were other things that had to happen, and that's why it took her 2 months to get representation. You see, the whole hearing is just they're talking about the same things over and over and over, so I'm going to try and get through it quickly. Melanie says Brandon said she hired a hitman to kill him, no evidence to support that, but Brandon told lies about her and other family members as well. Melanie said Boise in the text because she wanted to distract Brandon from her ultimate location because she knew she was being followed by a private investigator. And that we do know is true. Brandon did hire a private investigator to track her down, or to at least keep tabs on her. She said that she called Detective Pillar to ask about the safety and welfare of her children, and she asked him to help her find them, but he declined to help. She called the schools and found out that Brandon was not taking them to school and they had ultimately been unenrolled. She made a post on Facebook and drove to friends' homes to ask them to help look for them, and she says a friend, not naming that friend, saw them in Utah and that Brandon was leaving the kids at Brandon's parents' home. She went to the home and they refused her entry and then called the police. She said that Brandon had broken their mediation agreement. There was one in place when she went to Brandon's parents' home and called the police for a welfare check, and the police refused to do one. She went back with a court order showing it was her parenting time. Around December of last year, Melanie had been continuously reaching out to Brandon, trying to have contact with the children. And she said that Brandon texted her saying that she could have a Christmas call with the children because law enforcement told him to after conversations with Melanie's father. They didn't elaborate on that, so that's all I know. An email exchange took place between Brandon and Melanie on December 24th, in which Melanie wishes to have contact with the children for Christmas, but Brandon is not cooperating. He tells her if she wants to have contact with them, then she should go to law enforcement and the FBI and tell them who tried to kill him. He says that, I know you didn't do it, but you know who did. You need to go and tell them that Alex tried to kill me. Okay, now there are a series of text messages and emails entered into evidence that show that Brandon sent a video to Melanie of the kids opening presents, and that Brandon talked to Melanie and told her what she could and could not say to the kids if she talked to them, and that she had to go to the FBI and tell them that Alex shot at him. Melanie did not go to the December 11th hearing earlier that month because she had been arrested and she was allowed no contact with Brandon. She said that she was worried that she'd be arrested again if she showed up at the hearing, and her mediator also advised her to hire an attorney. So more emails and texts were sent to Brandon in January, wherein Melanie is still trying to reach out and have some contact or phone calls with the kids. Melanie even offered to have supervised visits, anything Brandon wanted, so she could have contact with her children. But Brandon kept reiterating the same point: tell the law enforcement who shot at me, and then I will let you see the kids. Melanie then goes on to say that her time with Lori and Alex showed no evidence of them being involved in anything nefarious or harming children or anything of the sort. And then they go back to arguing about money and payments and bank accounts and houses and businesses and bills, on and on and on and on. The same thing we've heard, all day long. Now, she also points out that Dr. Mellon did not find any mental health issues with her. Okay, that's interesting. I really hope that we can get our hands on that report. I will be watching the court to see if it's a filing that I can order, because I would love to read Dr. Mellon's assessment. The lawyer also talks about a $10,000 that Melanie allegedly took from the home, and Brandon didn't prove it, and Melanie says she didn't do it, so I don't know why that was even brought up. But in the end, Melanie says that she has $30,000 in credit card debt and less than $20,000 in assets, and that's it. No further witnesses. The trial is over, sort of. We will adjourn until tomorrow morning, where the court is going to rule on all of these different motions back and forth. We'll see who gets to pay for this mess, but as it stands, Melanie Pawlowski will be seeing her children over the course of December, and then she will have 50% parenting time with Brandon as of January 4th. So leave some comments down below. What do you think of this mess? I think it's kind of crazy. I'm really surprised. Very surprised that after the vehemence with which Brandon argued this whole last year about custody, that he just kind of said, okay, we'll do 50-50. Wait, what? What happened? How strange is that? What do you think about that? Leave your comments and we'll talk about it, and I'll be back with you tomorrow with another update after we find out what happens from the court in the morning. So, thank you for listening. Please stay tuned. There's more to come, and I will talk to you very soon. Bye for now.